Okay, so for this part of the Create Your Own RPG tutorial, I asked you to create some character classes and a hero class. And what this is doing is it's helping to test some of the skills that you learned in the Code Academy course in section 11 when you were learning a little bit of object-oriented programming and how to create classes. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to walk you through the creation of a hero class with a few class attributes as well as a few class methods so that you have an idea of how to start this part of the project. Now, for your own classes, you should use the classes that you created for the character sketches assignment and be creative. Maybe try to do some things that I'm not necessarily doing here with the class methods that I create. I just chose a couple of things that you could do, and you can do really whatever you like. So the first thing that you do to set up a class is create the class. And you do that in Python by naming your class. And so you use the keyword class and then the name for your class. Now the convention for classes in Python and in most programming languages is to capitalize the name of a class. And so that's to differentiate a class name from an instance name, which we're going to look at a little bit later on. So right here we're creating a class called Hero. And basically this is going to be a container for all of the information about our hero and the methods that are going to control what the hero does. So a class attribute is sort of like the nouns, the adjectives that describe the hero. Things like hit points or name or what's in the hero's inventory or maybe his favorite saying or something like that. The class methods are sort of like the verbs. These are the things that the hero is able to do, and you define those methods using functions within the class. So what we're going to do first here is we're going to define some class attributes. And so for our hero, we're going to need to give him a couple of things. We're going to give him, we're going to, in order to instantiate your hero class, you need to use this syntax here in line 7. What I'm doing here is I'm assigning hero to a variable that's a lowercase hero. And you're going to see how that works a little bit later on, but I just wanted to draw your attention to that right now. So now as we begin to flesh out our hero class, we're going to do a couple of things. Number one is we're going to give our hero a name. We're going to give him a nice Nordic name and call him Wolfgar. Now, if I go down here and I say print hero.name, now notice that I'm using the lowercase hero, the instantiated version of my hero class. We're going to run that, and the print statement will print the hero's name, which is Wolfgar. So what it's doing here is it's taking this hero and the attribute that we've assigned to it, it's assigning it to this hero variable, and then we can get at the attributes for a class using a dot notation. So in this case, we use hero.name. Now, if you were to try to use an uppercase hero.name, it would still give you Wolfgar because we're hard coding this in. But this will change a little bit when we start to create classes that can be reused for multiple things. And I'll show you how to do that a little bit later. Okay, so we're going to add a couple more things to our class here. I'm going to delete this print statement. And we're going to add hit points. We're going to set our hero's hit points equal to 10. And we're going to create an inventory for our hero. And right now this inventory is an empty list. We'll fill this list up with a lot of things later on. Okay, so now what we're going to do is now we have a hero who has a name, has hit points, and has an inventory. Now we need to be able to do something with all of this information. And that's where the class methods come in. So we're going to create a couple of class methods, and the first one is going to be a method that allows us to change our hero's hit points. So within the class hero, notice that all of these things are indented, so they all belong to this class, sort of like in Java or in another language if you were to put squiggly braces around it. Inside this class hero, we're creating a function called change hit points. And our function takes two parameters. One parameter is the parameter self. All class methods have to begin with the parameter self, and the reason they do this is that pulls in the data from the rest of the class. like the name, hit points, and inventory. And then we have a method called value, or sorry, a parameter called value. And that's going to be the value of hit points that we want to take off of our hero or put onto our hero. So then we create the function that will do this to our hero. So we're going to say self.hitpoints equals self.hitpoints plus value. So what we're doing here is we're saying self.hitpoints refers to our hero's hit points, number 10. We use this self because we want to refer to something outside of the scope of our function here. And so we use that to refer to the class that this function is a part of. That class is considered self. So down here, when we instantiate this, this hero will be self. So basically what we're saying here is lowercase hero.hitpoints equals lowercase hero.hitpoints plus the value that we're putting in as a parameter in this function. Now the next statement is going to be a print statement. And so this print statement is going to say print you have self.hitpoints number of hit points. And so what we're doing here is we're printing out for the user the number of hit points that they have left if they were to gain or lose hit points. Now you could use a function like this in a lot of different situations. Let's imagine that your hero finds a potion that gives him 5 extra hit points. You could use it to add those 5 hit points to your hero. If you're in a combat situation and a monster has taken 3 hit points away from your hero, you can use this function to do that. And we're going to play around with this function in a bit once we put the rest of our functions together and we have some room here to play. So the reason that we have this str here is something that we've seen a few times before. Remember that self.hitpoints is an integer, right? 10 is an integer up here. And so if we want to use that in a string, we have to coerce it into string form. So str takes self.hitpoints and turns it into a string. Okay, so that's one class method. Now your assignment was to create 2 more, so I've done that here for our hero Wolfgar. The next class method that we're going to do is a class method that adds an item to our inventory. Our inventory seems a little bit sad and lonely right now. There's nothing in there. And so we want to be able to find an item and then take that item and add it to our inventory list. So how do we do that? Well, first, notice we're passing self in here, so that passes our inventory in from our class. And so if I call self.inventory, I can append the item that I've passed in to the inventory. What that does is it will take anything that I put into this item parameter, and it'll pass it into this inventory list. And then I want to print for my user what's in the inventory, so I just add a print statement, and the print statement says your inventory plus self.inventory turned into a string. Now self.inventory is a list, so if you just try to add it to the string, it will give you an error. If you just use this str function to coerce it into a string, it'll give you a string value for your list, and we'll see how that works in just a moment. Our final method for this tutorial is going to be to give our character a way to greet other characters. And I wanted to make this kind of a little bit more interesting. Instead of just giving our character one standard greeting, I would like to give our character a greeting that's based on the mood that the character happens to be in. And so what we're doing here is we define our function greeting, and it takes 2 parameters. The first parameter is self, which we always take first in a class method. And the second parameter is the parameter mood, which will be a string of the character's mood. And then we check the mood. So if I were to pass into this function the mood happy, the string happy, then it'll print, hello friend, I'm feeling great today. Now I can, using elif statements, I can add a number of other moods, a number of other greetings that our character could use. So if the character's tired, the character could say, I could really use a nap right now. Or if the character's angry, they could say, you'd better get out of my way if you know what's good for you. Or if the character is scared, it could say that this place gives me the creeps. And then I also want to include an else statement to handle any other issue. Say you throw in a mood that doesn't happen to exist, and so the character will then say, I don't know what to think right now. So this is our character class. Now, in order to use this class, we have to do a few things. We have to basically call this function, all these functions on our instantiation of the hero that we have here in line 27. So if I want to change hit points, what I do is I call hero.change_hit points. And then I pass in the value of the hit points that I want to change. Now, self is assumed by Python, so you don't have to pass self in as a variable. You can, but it's unnecessary. So you can pass in the value of, I'm going to pass in the value of the number of hit points that I want to change my character's hit points by. So let's say I want to add 5 hit points for my character. And if I run this, you can see in my console, it prints out that my character now has 15 hit points. Notice my character started with 10. And so if I were to say right now, just to prove it to you, if I were to type print hero.hitpoints, this will now print 15 because I've added 5 hit points using this hero.changeHitPoints method. So now if I wanted to add an item to my hero's inventory, I do a similar thing. I type hero for my instantiation of hero, and then I type add_to_inventory, and then I add the item. My hero is an avid reader, so I'm going to have him pick up a book. And when I press run, it'll print your inventory, and then now I have a book in my inventory. Now check this out. In this case, I have my hero pick up a book. Let's say later on he's walking around and my hero wants to pick up a sword because he's not only an academic, he's a fighter. So he picks up a sword. Not a sword, a sword. There we go. And when we run this, it now gives us 2 statements. The first statement comes from our hero add to inventory book, and the second statement from hero add to inventory sword. But notice that now we have the book and the sword in our inventory. So when you create an instantiation of a class, what you're in essence creating is a complex variable that you can change in lots of different ways depending on how that variable is set up. And so it'll save what my hero has in his inventory. And so if you're creating your text-based adventure and you need your hero to have an item in order to get past a challenge, this is a great way to do it. Your hero could have to get a golden key in order to get past a door. And you can check to see if that golden key is in the hero's inventory when the hero gets to the door and tries to get through it. Okay, so now we're going to try to use our greeting. And so we're going to say hero.greeting. And I'm going to see what happens if I greet, if my mood is tired. If I do that, it'll print out I could really use a nap right now. And it'll print out the print statements for all of the moods that we've defined. A similar function could be used if you wanted to set up a conversation engine between your hero and other characters. That if a character asks your hero about a particular thing, you could have a keyword that your hero is looking for where your hero will respond in a certain way. This could also be really useful for non-player characters. If you're having a conversation with an NPC and that character knows, say, where the dragon's lair is, if your question to that character contains the word dragon, maybe then the NPC tells you where to find the dragon's lair. So with just a little bit of tweaking, you can make this method do quite a lot of things. Now, what if I wanted to create more than one hero? What if I want to hold more than one of these heroes in memory and change some of their attributes depending on the hero that I create? Well, I'm going to show you that in just a second here. I've got to reset a couple of things. Okay, so in Python, for Python classes, the way that they're often used is to create a kind of a generalization about something. And so I don't want just a hero named Wolfgar. I want to be able to create whatever hero I want. And so in order to do that, I create an init method. So I'm going to comment out my class attributes here. And I'm going to create an init method. And I do this by using a function called def init. And notice that the init has 2 underscores before the word init and 2 underscores after the word init. And what this does is it's a method that's used to initialize a class in Python. So it's a special Python method. Now in this init function, I'm going to add some variables. Some parameters. First, I put in the parameter self. Then I put in the attributes that I want to initialize using this init function. In this case, name, hit points, and inventory. And then I have to assign self.name to name, self.hitpoints to hitpoints, and self.inventory to inventory. Now what this does is it takes what will be passed into this function when I initialize my hero, and it assigns it to a variable that's tied to self that can then be used with all of the class's methods. So when I have an init function and I want to initialize this function, I do it in a slightly different way. Instead of just creating the hero by using the variable hero and then capital H hero with parentheses, I create this hero by passing in to this as parameters the name, hit points, and inventory that I've set up here. So I'm going to create a new hero. I'm going to call him Loki because I always root for the bad guys. And I'm going to give Loki 60 hit points because he's a little bit OP. And I'm going to give him a horned helmet in his inventory. Oh, and yeah, also a spear. Because why not? Okay. So now I have this hero, and I've initialized it using this init method. Now, if I call hero, and I were to say print hero, remember lowercase hero, dot name, my program is going to print Loki because I passed that name into this hero variable. Now check this out. Let's say that I want to create another hero, and so I want to create a new hero. I know it's a really creative variable name there, but let's call it new hero. And we're going to instantiate the class hero again. This time we're going to create Thor. We're going to give him, let's say, 90 hit points. And we're going to give him an inventory that contains his giant hammer. All right, I'll call it Mjolnir. And a really awesome fur-trimmed cape. Okay? So now if I print hero name, it's still going to print Loki. Because in order to see this new hero, I need to use that hero's variable. So new hero.name. And it'll print the name Thor. So in my game, I could actually just call these Thor and Loki. Or sorry, that would be really confusing. Loki and Thor. And then I could use this hero's information in my game. So if I want to print Thor's name, I run it, I get Thor. And if I want to say add something to Thor's inventory, let's say Thor.add to inventory Infinity Stone, then what will happen is it will print out Thor's inventory, Mjolnir, the fur-trimmed cape, and an Infinity Stone. And so you can use methods like this with an init class in order to take some of the, to basically abstract away some of the detail. And if you've got characters or items that share properties in common, you can create these classes to set those properties and to set methods that will that can be used from class to class. You can nest classes. You can do all sorts of things here. We're going to play around a little bit more with classes as we look at our NPCs and our items a little bit later on. But I thought this would be a good introduction for you. And I'm looking forward to see what you're able to come up with and what creative classes and class methods you're able to create for your own text-based adventure. So hopefully this was helpful to you. If you have any questions, please ask them in the Coding Help Forum, and have a nice night.